Hey folks, hello and welcome. My name is Ryan Chapman, and I'm very excited to have some of you folks here for our Cybersecurity Awareness Month. The month of October is really good for me and folks like myself in the industry because we get to advocate all the fun things about cybersecurity and have folks such as yourself come and hang out with us, learn from us, we learn from you, and just try to get it out there. Hey, we're all up against this massive threat, this looming threat. What is that looming threat? Cyber incidents. Let's just go with that for right now. However, specifically, I'll be talking about ransomware related things and stuff today. And that's because I am the new author for SANS Forensics 528, Ransomware for Incident Responders. It's a 4-day course on incident response, like hands on the keyboard type of stuff for ransomware events and incidents, trying to help you with prevention, early detection, if they do get in kind of thing. Anywho, I'll digress on my course. The idea is that I live and I breathe ransomware, as in I had very little sleep last night because I was dealing with ransomware. That's just what we do in the industry a lot. So in this particular stream, what I'd like to do, first off, is just welcome everyone who's popping in. I see a bunch of chat streaming through here. We got some folks from all over the world. Glad to see that. If you want to drop where you're from, just so I can say hello and see how we're doing. We've got some folks from Florida, from France, Maryland, Colombia. That's cool. I like that. From India. Heck yeah. Egypt. Yay. I love that. I love the worldwide. There it is on the screen there. The worldwide presence. Ghana. Really cool. If you have any questions for me as we're going along, feel free to pop those in the chat. I have someone helping in the background who's going to pin some of the items and basically ensure that I get around to answering any questions you might have. What we're going to start out with here is just to give you an overall feel for what we're going to be doing today, specifically discussing ransomware from the cybersecurity awareness perspective. Now, a lot of the presentations we may give here at SANS, I got my little shirt on there, right, is technical in nature, very highly technical in nature. What we're going to do right now is, rather than me showing everyone exactly how ransomware works at the lowest level and what type of tools the threat actors use and all that type of stuff, I'm going to talk about how the general users within your environment, now that could be you directly, you, right? Pointing at the camera, or it can be everyone else you work with, essentially. How can you impact the state of the organization in terms of ransomware? In other words, what do you need to know about in order to help your organization avoid ransomware, right? So we do a lot of discussions concerning phishing here at SANS, and that's one of the big things that we're going to be talking about today. We're also going to be talking about the other two, because there are 3 top infection vectors for ransomware, after I give you an overview, by the way, of what ransomware truly and really is. When we say ransomware, what do we mean? So I'll go over kind of the intro to ransomware, a little bit of history and background. And then we're going to go over what you can do in terms of the following. We've got the top 3 infection vectors, and 2 of those, one of them is phishing. I was just surprised, right? I'll tell you that right now. The others, how do the general user base, how do those people affect those infection vectors? As in, how can your actions help or not help when it comes to ransomware attacks being successful, or averted or thwarted? That's just the fun word, thwarted. So, all right, looking, we've got Mexico City in the house, Colorado, California. What? Colorado, United States? You're right next to me. I'm in Arizona in the United States. Oh, I just love seeing all the people popping in there. So, all right. So anyways, when you have your questions start coming in, we will tag those suckers, like I said. So if you want to start getting them in now, feel free. Okay. This presentation, by the way, is going to be me talking to you directly, what we call sometimes a talking head, as opposed to showing you a bunch of screens and slides and all that. So this is what we're doing right here. Okay, ransomware. When we say ransomware, in the past, before times, typically we referred to a malware sample or a malware specimen, typically within a Windows environment. It was usually a .exe file. Someone would click on it, double click, or as I call it, silly click. Like, you shouldn't be clicking on that, but you do something silly and you click it. And one machine would be locked down, essentially. In fact, they started their life more as lockers. And the old term lockers, as opposed to encryptors, is used more so on the darknet forums by the actors themselves, even today. they refer to ransomware as lockers. The idea being that it locks down your system and prevents you from using it, like literally mouse and keyboard. You're like, hey, and you have to pay a ransom to get access back to it. We've now evolved to obviously encryption. So you have files that are being targeted on, hopefully not your, but on a machine. Certain directories, certain file types will be targeted by the cryptor payloads, right? But that's not ransomware. When we say ransomware now, we don't just mean an executable that does encryption stuff. In fact, we refer to that as the payload. That's the payload. However, ransomware is an entire campaign. It's an attack campaign with its own life cycle and phases, individual phases of the attack. The reason that ransomware is so, I almost said deadly, hopefully it's not moving to the point of human life at stake, although we're not far from that, unfortunately. The reason it's so detrimental, there's a couple different things. The evolutions of ransomware have led to certain situations that we have to deal with. Most folks are not aware of how to deal with it because they don't understand what it truly is. A threat actor these days that comes into an organization and a would-be victim environment, they're not a ransomware developer. They don't write the code at all. Rather, they are usually what we refer to as an affiliate. And this is made possible by a system that's been put into place. It's an entire ecosystem. It's a business, sadly. It's a very successful business. It's referred to as ransomware as a service. So as ransomware developers were developing the ransomware over time, they realized, well, I want to make more money, but I don't have the time, right? I just don't have the time to go out and to attack a bunch of organizations and to get my ransomware into those organizations. So someone came up with a wonderful idea. Wait a minute. What if I have other people do the work for me, right? So it basically has evolved into what's very similar to a multi-level marketing, or you might know it as a pyramid scheme, right? It's this sense where the developers allow leasing of, or for that matter, they just give them for free in some cases, of their software, the actual ransomware cryptor, and they provide that to people who want to become an affiliate. An affiliate is a person that's just one part of this overall ecosystem. Their job is usually to either get into the initial organization, like initially get in, or their job is to actually have a handoff from someone else, usually referred to as an initial access broker. There's an entire core group of this massive ecosystem. They're called an IAB, initial access broker. Their entire job is just to get in to your organization. Those folks are the ones we have to worry about right now because we want to avoid them at all costs. When the access broker is successful, and unfortunately they're often successful, they then hand off to the affiliate. On the darknet forums, they refer to them often as pen testers. So that's short for penetration tester, which you may be thinking, you mean like the legitimate job of being a penetration tester, like to break things, but by design and on purpose to help? Yes, but not to help, not at all to help. So these people are recruited. They have hiring managers. They have program managers. They have, like, you name it, how a business would function and be organized. They have it. They even have, if an affiliate has provided ransomware payloads and they get into an environment and they deploy the ransomware, right? They do all the bad stuff that I'll be kind of talking about in the phases portion of our little discussion here, right? If they do all that and then they expect they're going to get money because a ransom is paid, but they don't get the money from the operator who leased them the ransomware payload, there's actually, I call it ransomware court, also kangaroo court, just because it's just funny to me to call it that. But on these forums, they literally have grievances they can file against one another. And they're like, well, I worked my butt off to get that ransomware into that environment and I didn't get paid what I was due. And they have to escrow their money basically to be a part of this ecosystem often. And so there's essentially a panel and judges who can say, you know what, you are owed that money. So honor among thieves, I guess. So the developers of the actual ransomware, when we say, hey, this organization was hit by Black Basta, or that's one of the names, by the way, Black Basta, or they say Black Byte or Alpha V, or the former Conti Group, or Karakurt, or the infamous at this point Lockbit ransomware group. when we say that, we don't really mean that there's this massive group, like just take one of them, Lockbit. We don't mean that there's this huge group that does all this bad stuff, right? That's what is Lockbit. Lockbit is actually made up of all these individual roles. Technically, to me, Lockbit are the developers of the payload, right? That comes at the very end of an overall attack campaign. So you have the intrusion access brokers who get into the environment. We're going to be talking about how they do that, the top 3 ways in which they do that very shortly here. It's kind of why we're here. Once they get in, they hand off to an affiliate. That's someone or a group of someone's who basically just leased, if you will, or just were given, ransomware from a core development team. Sometimes these teams could have a handful of people. Sometimes they could have 20 people or so on the development. They have project managers. They literally have, they follow best practices for coding. Some of them, like they have ticketing systems and they're like, hey, there's a bug in our ransomware. It's funny, but not funny. So anyways, the developers, right, when the affiliates get stuff in there, once they get it to execute, then you have another subset of roles. You have negotiators. You also have chasers. So negotiators are the actors, the threat actors, who come into the environment and say, hey, it sucks for you. You've been ransomed and we want from you X millions of dollars or whatever it may be, right? And then once they've made that declaration, right, the victim organization, who, by the way, they call clients. They almost always call them clients or partners. They don't call them victims because that just sounds icky, right? So they call them clients. That's cute that they're doing them a favor. All right. So anyways, these folks will come in and try to negotiate. And that's when either you, your organization, or your third-party legal counsel, or your insurance group, or a hired specific group, or a group hired specifically to engage in negotiations, which you should be very careful to ever interact yourself, by the way. Just don't do that. They'll go in and negotiate. Those chasers, right? That's a role called chasers. And they will actually chase you down. They'll be the ones knocking on your door. They won't physically knock on your door, at least not yet, which I guess is good. They'll call your organization. They'll call your executive. Sometimes they'll call your executives. They'll call your vendors. They'll call your suppliers. They'll call your resellers if you make products. They will chase that money. That's their job. Meanwhile, during the ransomware campaign, which I'll talk about the phases, data is typically taken out of the environment as another means of extortion, right? Not just did we encrypt your files, and not just did we lock down your servers and resources because we encrypted all the files on those systems, right? You have to pay us money to get that back. But also, we've stolen a whole bunch of your data, right? And in order to stop us from releasing that to the public, just all your competitors, your intellectual property, your HR documents, all the fun stuff you don't want the world to see, or to stop them from selling it on the dark net or from auctioning it on the dark net. That's the other part of the extortion. You have to pay the ransom, right? So in addition to all these people, the people who pull the data out are typically the affiliates, right? But once the data is out, some of these groups even have people, their job is basically a data custodian. So some of you might be like, hey, I'm a data custodian, at my work. Like, yeah, they have the same role as you, basically. They look through the wealth of data that was taken out of the environment and they categorize it all and they warehouse it and they tag it. And they go like, well, those are contracts, these are nuclear contracts. We'll put those in the good pile, that kind of thing. And they find what they can leverage for what they can use for maximum leverage. Okay, so I'll digress there with the overall feel for who all's involved. Once the threat actor gets in, what do? Right? They're going to be on a primary host. Hopefully it's not your host. And that's what we're going to be talking about very shortly here. Once they're on that host, they then execute commands in order to find out what type of environment they're in, what type of system they're on, what user account they currently have access to. They will then what we call elevate privileges and credential dumping, basically trying to elevate their position in the network, right? I'm this user here. I want to be that user up there. I'll just basically keep it at that, right? And then they want to move laterally, which means they go from the one infected host to all the other fun stuff. They typically go to your core servers and do all their bad things, right? They then start looking for data to basically steal. And then after they've stolen that data, only after all that, the tail end of, basically all their actions or all their objectives have been met, that's when they will deploy the ransomware payload. So when we say ransomware, we don't just mean an executable file. No, we're referring to this entire business, this entire ecosystem. The developers who provide the malware to people who get in, who hand it off to people who attack the organization from the inside, who steal data, who hand it off to data managers, who then deploy the ransomware, who then gets you over to the negotiators, and then the chasers chase that money, right? Don't get me started on the laundering of the money once it comes in. So that ecosystem, where does it begin for you? Hopefully not. Actually, better yet, where should it not begin for you? Let's go with that instead. Okay, we have the top 3 infection vectors, as we call it, meaning the ways that they get in. Number 1 is phishing. When I say number 1, by the way, the number 1 in spot, they kind of, every month, they flip-flop. So it's usually number 1 or number 2. Number 2 is known as remote desktop protocol. We call it RDP. So Romeo Delta Papa, RDP. That is a service that many general users don't know much about, don't really care about. You may use RDP or you may not use RDP. However, your account and your credentials may be able to be leveraged to use this protocol called RDP. So the quick and dirty, you have hosts or servers that are internet facing. Here's your organization. There's a server, and for whatever reason, it's just sitting out there. I don't know about this hand. I'm not sure. I thought this was a good idea. It looks kind of silly now, but whatever. So it's just here. It's just sitting out there, and everyone on the internet can go, hey, 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 hey. And what they're trying to do is log in, right? Don't allow your credentials, your username, and your password to be the method by which they get into that service. You don't have to know what RDP is. Your focus is basically on your password. Essentially, that's what we're focused on here. So a big part of security awareness is on passwords. So we're going to be talking about that, right? Phishing. In phishing, you may have your password stolen. It's called credential harvesting. More on that coming up. Okay, so we have phishing, which you should all be intimately familiar with. Any user, any organization, you should have security awareness training packages. You should be testing your users. Hopefully you're being tested, and hopefully you're passing those tests, by the way. Yeah, social engineering training from the chat, exactly. In addition to those 2 things, the third way that threat actors get in often is via what we just call software exploitation, right? Technically, vulnerability exploitation. In other words, they legitimately hack into the organization. But what are they really doing? Without getting too into detail, what they're doing is usually, and I'm making this number up, but 95+% of the time, right? I just made that number up. It's most of the time. They're not coming up with something super unique that no one's ever seen. Like, whoa, what is that? No, they're leveraging exploits, meaning proof of concept, hacking scripts and whatever you want to call it, that are really well known and for which there are patches available or have been patches available for a long time. I worked a case recently where the infection vector was a VMware Horizon environment. And if you're not familiar, VMware Horizon happens to provide applications and basically provide them for remote connectivity and things of that nature, right? So remote productivity suite is what I would call it. I'm not sure what their marketing calls it. That's what I call it. There was a bug, if you will, a vulnerability in a certain group of versions. A patch came out late last year. A bunch of organizations just never applied that patch. What can you do from your side, right? I'm not talking to all the IT specific people. Like obviously you are hopefully helping with patching the entire environment, the network appliances and all that. But you, every you on the call, what can you do on your devices and on your computer? You can follow the protocols for updates. All right. How many of you, show of hands, how many of you receive notifications and you're on your host, your computer, your laptop or desktop, whatever you have, and it says, "Hey, I need to update. Is that okay?" And what do you say almost all the time? "No, go away. I'm busy. Stop it." Right? I don't want to do all that. Your computer itself may, without you even knowing, be internet accessible. That's a bad thing. It's more on your IT department. On top of that, if a threat actor gets into an environment, once they get in, any vulnerabilities that are on the inside, now they can start exploiting those. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, I use this, let's say Adobe Acrobat. I haven't updated Adobe Acrobat in I don't know how long. Every time the IT notification pops up, I say, no, I don't want to do that. I'm busy. I have work to do. Like, go away. Then you're becoming part of the problem. Like, don't do that. Also, phishing that comes in, if you were to inadvertently fall for some of these phishing attacks, when you do so, you may be facilitating even further damage if you have outdated software. So essentially, one of the things that you can do, like what have we talked about so far? Don't fall for phishing, right? We got to talk about your passwords. Talk about your passwords. And hopefully you don't have horrible passwords. Oh. And then we have to talk about, in general, keeping devices up to date. All right. So those are some of the things I'm going to focus on as we move along. Before I get any further here, I see that we have some questions. So let's see. If a client runs out of options but to pay the ransom after data extortion, what assures the client the hackers will delete the data? I'll just stop reading it right there. Nothing. Nothing assures them in any way, shape, or form. One moment. That's a great question. Zero assurances. Yeah, there's another LinkedIn user that commented on that. The assurances come from the threat actor. And keep in mind, I call them a threat actor because that's who they are. You're working with criminals. Keep that in mind at all times with ransomware. Well, they said they were going to, delete my files. Okay. We have seen instances, maybe not a whole bunch. It's not commonplace, but we have seen where a group will pay the ransom, sometimes millions of dollars, a decent amount of money. And then the data is still leaked out either to the public or it's sold on the dark net marketplaces. It's just a note for general cybersecurity awareness, right? When people say dark net or dark web, and it sounds like this seedy, crazy, like awesome high tech, thing, it's not. The dark net usually just refers to a network that you have to be connected through some specific circuit in order to access. Typically, that circuit is Tor, T-O-R, Tor. You've heard of the Tor browsers? You literally just go download the Tor browser, like you type in, well, don't do this right now, but you type in Tor browser in Google or Bing if you're, weirdo. And then you go, sorry for you Bing users, sorry. And you just click download and then you open it and it says, you want to connect to the darknet, right? It says, do you want to connect to Tor? And you say, yeah. And then once it connects, now you're on the darknet. That's it. That's all it is, by the way. So we have seen cases where the data has been sold. We've seen cases where if you pay the ransom, you are marked as a target. Your organization is then put out there on the darknet forums. There's a bunch of forums, 6 or 7 really big ones and a bunch of smaller ones, where the threat actors communicate with each other. They use private messaging tools and apps like Rocket Chat and Jabber and Telegram. They're really big on Telegram. Anyways, they communicate with each other and they'll say, hey, that company right there, like they paid. How do you know they pay? Because they just paid me. Like, that's how I know. And the affiliates will work with one another. Isn't that cute? So anyways, yeah, you really no assurances. You just kind of hope that they'll go by their word. And again, they're thieves, they're criminals, Another question in here, even though detecting the ecosystem is getting advanced, what causes the company to become a victim? And what does that still need to be? Okay, I love that question that's on the screen right now from David. Thank you. The number one reason for ransomware is what I call security 101 failures. And I legitimately mean security 101. For folks not from the United States, we have a bunch of you here. Hello again, by the way. 101, the term 101 is a reference in the United States at the very least. I'm not sure if the UK has 101, but in university or what we call college courses, your initial course, like your first course for a brand new topic, is usually referred to as something 101. So if I were to say Spanish 101, then I mean like that's my first class ever on Spanish, learning the Spanish language, right? So when I say security 101 for the global audience, what I mean is stuff that we all should have learned like the first day of IT school, like the first couple, hey, You should not have a horrible password. Or think about it. One of the top 3 ways that ransomware gets into the environment is via phishing, right? So if a phishing email comes in and that phishing email has an attachment, right? A little file that's attached to it. If that attachment is like a .iso, I won't get too into detail, but it's a type of file, right? And it's actually a disk image. It's an image of what used to be like, we used to have them for like CDs. You would have remember CDs? You would have a CD. You can make an ISO of it, so you didn't need the CD anymore. You could just load the ISO file. Why would your users ever need to receive a .iso file via email? In my opinion, they should never need that. You should always block those files in the email gateway, in your email system itself, if you can, or in your email security gateway, right? Your IT folks should be handling all that for you. A failure to block any types of attachments that are commonly associated with ransomware infection, let alone just commodity malware, info stealers, which steal your banking information and your Amazon and stuff like that, passwords, those types of things. If there's zero security in like, oh, we should block these things, that's a 101 type of thing, right? Not for you. That's going to be a little bit more for the IT team who's in charge of your email system. It all boils down to very simplistic things that are done that are not done, really. Remember, one of the top 3 infection, one of the top 2 is remote desktop protocol, right? RDP. What is that? Remember, it's you have a server. How did I do it? This is your organization, right? There's a server right there. And for whatever reason, it's accessible to the internet. So everyone from the internet, all 4 billion aroundish IPv4 version 4 addresses, if they wanted, can go, hey, what are you doing? Like, hi, and then try to basically log in, right? And why is that even a thing? All right, a lot of times that should be locked down in very technical ways. Your IT team should lock those down. A lot of times they're not, and that's what leads to, oops, ransomware. All right, those are the questions I see for now. I'm going to keep going. So let's talk a bit about phishing, right? And I know that, let me rephrase that. I really hope that everyone here has gone through some type of phishing training. Some type. Let's go through some right now. All right. Security Awareness Month, October. Here we go. When you receive an email and you don't know who it's from, right? Be very wary of touching it in any way, shape, or form. Even if you know who it's from, if you're not expecting it in general, right? You should also be wary of that. There's an entire, I want to say that I use the term a lot, it seems like on this call so far, but ecosystem of financial or e-crime, as we call it. E-crime, like it's like an iPod or something. The number one thing that is more profitable over ransomware is what's called business email compromise. That's also directly related, for the most part, on phishing, by the way. They make, I think it was, what did I see? It was $1.2 billion in 2019, I want to say. I can't quote the source, I apologize, but I was just reading an article from a report from a trusted source. I don't know who it was, but it's a lot of money, right? And that's 3 years ago. Imagine what it is now. Anyway, if a threat actor gets into your email system, now they can send emails as you to other people, right? How would they do that? Well, you gave them your password, right? How'd you give them your password? Whatever you did, stop it. Don't do that anymore. And let's talk about that right now. So if you have an email that comes in, right, there's training on look at the subject, look at the sense of urgency, if there is one, look at, all these things, try to see where it's from. If you're more technically inclined, you may have heard of, look at the email headers. I'll digress on that. It's metadata that shows you where the email is truly from, if you will. Most general users will never look at a header, and you don't care. You just want to see your email, right? What do we really have to worry about with phishing emails? Whether they're crafted really, really well, or whether it's like, you would look at it and say, that's lame. I mean, lame. That's not technical. It's so obvious, and they'll still be successful. What you're really looking out for are one of two things. One is a link to click on. Maybe you shouldn't click those random links. The other thing is a file attachment. So let's start with links. Okay, you may have, I hate to pick on them. I'm not picking on them. I actually love them as an organization. But DHL, is the one of the world's largest shipping organizations, right? With international involved stuff, right? In the United States, we're FedEx and UPS. The rest of the world use a bunch of services. DHL is one of the biggest ones, right? So DHL is often used in phishing campaigns. You'll receive an email and it will look, it'll have the graphics, the yellow and red, or I'm colorblind, whatever the I think it's yellow and red, right? And and it'll look really legitimate. And some of them will be like, hey, you missed a package, silly. And you're like, what? I didn't even know I was getting a package. You're like, yeah. Like, click here, man. You're like, okay, boop. When you click those links, what happens? In the past, what you might fall for by clicking a link was known as an exploit kit or an EK. Long story short, you click a link, you go to a web page that loads in your web browser. That's a web page, apparently, like that. And when it loads up, it attacks your computer. It runs malicious code. It basically drops malware onto your system. Those days are mostly in the past. We don't see that a whole lot anymore. That was its own economy. I mean, if you will, it's ecosystem, like I like to say, in 2012 and 13. Not really anymore, right? When you click that link, it's usually going to do one of two major things. One is it's going to take you to a location where it wants you to download something. Don't do that. If you click a link, and no matter how legitimate it looks, right? If it's like, hey, click here to so-and-so and get so-and-so, especially with like DHL or any type of phishing for any courier services, shipping services. I was thinking of courier earlier. It's a word I couldn't come up with. I got it now. If you click on one of those files to bring it down to your system, right? At that point, you've brought the threat into your environment, okay? Why is it difficult for you maybe to identify some of those? And why would it be difficult for your IT, for example, department, to block some of those? Well, the threat actors know if I give you a link, and even if it's in a legitimate looking shipping notification, right? A courier service saying, hey, you're trying to give me this big old awesome free package. You're like, yay, right? If that's the case, when you click that little sucker and it loads up and you have the ability then to download something. I need a lot of water today. If you go in and you click on that particular item, right, the security mechanisms and protections that you would have in your email system to stop that particular type of threat. Like, let's go back to the ISO file that I talked about. Like a Word document is a .doc or a .docx or a .xls or something like that, right? File types. Just say the .iso. Okay, if you ever see DHL say, hey, click this link and then download the file you see there, that's how you'll get your information, right? If you ever see that in general, especially from a courier service, don't do that. Please don't do that. I don't care what the file type is. Don't do that. Okay, the courier should not be randomly having you, download this HTML file. I'm not talking about being attached to the email. I'll get to that. I'm talking about you go to a link and says, hey, download this file, right? That's not how these services usually work. If you are in doubt, and you should be in that case, please report that to whomever you're supposed to report that to. If your email system, like maybe you use Outlook, has a little phishing reporting button at the top right, or whatever system you're using, boop, click it. Send that over to your security operations center. Send it over to the team that deals with that. I worked on one for years. Let them deal with it. Let them look at it, because they will be the ones. Man, we'll nose it here. Sorry. Whew. They'll be the ones who go and grab the file in a contained environment, and they'll look at it, they'll finagle it and forensically analyze it. And when they find the threat, they'll be like, oh no, what? And then they'll be able to take, because you notified them, they'll be able to perform what we call threat intelligence, right? Threat intel on the sender of the email, what the email looked like, where it actually came from, IP addresses, identifiers on the internet, that kind of stuff, where the link actually went, like all those things. They'll take that and they'll search through the environment to find who else received that exact same email, who else received emails just like it, who else received emails similar to it, or from the same sender, the same email, even domain. If they're using like John works at DHL at proton.me, right? That's not DHL, that's Proton Mail. Like, why would DHL be sending stuff from Proton Mail? Your team will then go look. what other stuff did we get in the past 24 hours, 3 days, 7 days, whatever, from Proton mail addresses? And they'll probably find a bunch of stupid stuff. And you can actually help prevent ransomware just by doing that. Because if you stop the threat by reporting it, you'd be amazed at the impact that can have. I meant to say, if you report something, you might be amazed by the impact because you might be able to stop an entire ransomware campaign. And I've seen it time and time again. Okay. Why is it maybe difficult for some of those links, and why might it fool you? Okay. Security awareness type of stuff. This is something I wish more people knew. There's a term that has become not yet pervasive in our industry, but it's getting there. It's referred to as living off trusted sites. Living off trusted sites. I'm going to put it in the chat real quick. If I can find the chat. Hold on. Hey, there you go. Whoop. So living off trusted sites. That is a technique by which the threat actors, right, lots as it's called, will go into or will send an email or whatnot with a link that is a trusted site. It will be a link on box.com or dropbox.com or Google Drive or OneDrive or any other file sharing site you may already use, right? So if that's the in the chat, that's kind of funny, right? It's a test. Don't click. No, it's not a test. That's pretty funny though. Good call. You got your eye on the ball, Timothy. You get 100 points. They're meaningless, but you got 100 of them, so that's cool. All right. I, as an IT fella, I can't go in to the firewall and say no one can go to Google Drive, right? Can I? In some organizations, maybe I can, but in others, maybe I can't, right? Or I might not even be looking for that because it's Google Drive, right? Google Drive's not bad, right? It's not bad. Dropbox isn't bad. Box.com, that's not bad. They're very legitimate sites, right? But threat actors can create free accounts on there and put bad stuff in there. So my point is, when you get a link, if you do click it and it's telling you, hey, download stuff, and you're like, yay, no, report that. Like, don't randomly download something, from a link. And also, if it don't allow a well-known or like, oh, this looks like a legitimate file sharing site. Don't let that fool you that whatever's there is not malicious as heck, right? And that it isn't what we call a first stage malware payload. In other words, something you download, you double click on it, and it downloads malware in the background. That malware checks your system and finds out where it is in the world and goes, ooh, fun. And then downloads more malware. And then that's the intrusion access broker. Their job is done now, right? They have what we call a shell, a remote session on your computer, and they hand it off to the ransomware affiliate. They say, hey, look, I got you something. And they go, yay. And then they get in. And then from there, it's game over, right? It could be a matter of hours, could be a number of days, weeks, depending on the ransomware group. 5 to 7 days is kind of common these days, is what we're seeing. Some can be as little as 5 or 10 hours for a ransomware entire operation, stealing a bunch of data and then encrypting your entire environment. Oops. You can stop a lot of that by being very cognizant of links in your emails, like we've discussed. The next thing, attachments within your emails. If you have a file attached to your email, right, just in general, I'd like to put the word out to everyone out there watching. And if you could tell the people next to you, and they tell the people next to them, and tell everyone else in that entire organization, rah, don't share files via email. If you can, don't. As in, like, if you can avoid it, avoid it, right? You most likely, and hopefully, you have be sure to ask questions, by the way. I see a little ticker there. I'll answer what do you got for me. You may have an approved file sharing mechanism or tool, maybe OneDrive, use that to share files. Be very wary of attachments. Okay, now your email security gateway and your IT team, sometimes brand new threats come out and they're file types that we're just not prepared for. We as a security community is just not ready for. We go, what is that? The ISO file, the .iso. Not in my wildest dreams would I have thought 5 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, that we would have to block those in email gateways. Like, who would ever send a .iso file? It doesn't make any freaking sense, right? But the threat actors realized, hey, you know what? They're not looking for ISO files, which is why they started doing it, So if you have an attached file, you hopefully are getting a little bit of love from your email security team and trying to, look into some of the things in there and get rid of them. But if you get an attachment, you have to be very, very careful about opening that attachment. That attachment type these days, what we're seeing a lot of are archives. When I say an archive is like a zip file. Many of you are probably familiar with zip files, right? ZIP. And a zip file is a type of archive, right? There are others. Zip's the most common we see with these phishing campaigns. And basically you take a file or a directory or whatever group of files and you compress them into a single file, which we call an archive, right? Archival utilities are used to create those. Your email gateway is probably not going to block archives. It may, and it should, block things like certain types, like a RAR file, RAR. Don't ever open a .rar file that's in your email. Don't do it. You probably, you may receive those. Don't touch them. You may have a .7z for 7-zip file. Don't touch that. If there's a file attached and you look at the name of the file and it has a type on there and you're like, what's that? Stop. Stop what you're doing. What's that? I want to see what that is. No, don't do that. Your email gateway is probably not stopping zip files. And many ransomware cases begin with a zip file coming in via email. It's attached to whatever type of, we call them phishing lures, by the way, like a lure to grab the fish when you're fishing, like fishing for fish to eat, hopefully. So those attachments, if they have a zip file and you go, well, it's just a zip file, I don't know what's in there. So you download it and you double click it. For the past, I don't know how many years, Windows has natively opened zip files. It will open just like a folder. To you, it looks like it's a folder, like just a regular old folder you double clicked on. It's not. It's actually the contents of the zip file being presented to you by Windows in a very streamlined, sleek fashion. All right. However, it is an archive that is being opened and presented to you. When you then see a file type in there, whatever that is, be very careful of opening that up, because you'll have Microsoft Word documents, Microsoft Excel documents. Those are the two biggest ones we see. And by the way, that's a whole other thing I'll be getting into very shortly here. If you then click a file in there, you may be subverting a lot of the security protections that are implemented within your organization, because that archive just kind of slipped through like, I'm just a little zip file, like, don't worry about me. And then you double click it. We see a bunch of ransomware cases. We have seen over the past couple of years. It was a zip file, right? And the phishing lure could be, again, shipping service or, Amazon gift card. Hey, you got to get this gift card. Someone sent it to you and you go, yay, I wasn't expecting that. No, you weren't, right? Be careful. You get that file and inside there was a .js file. By default, Windows hides the file extensions from users. It's such a horrible, horrible idea, in my opinion, because you don't know what the heck file you're getting or what's in the file, what kind of file it is. Anyway, a .js file is JavaScript. Why would someone that why would someone send you, whoever you is right now watching this, a zip file that inside of it has a JavaScript file? And why would you double click that? Why would that happen? Well, it happens all the time. All right. So I'll digress on the attachments thing. I'm just giving you a heads up that whatever comes directly attached, problematic. Hopefully your email security gateway will clean some things, right? But things get through all the time. That might be new attack types or some that your system just doesn't handle or you don't have detections for. You may get an archive, and in that archive, you can have things that are in there. If you receive an email and it says you have to get this file, the attached file, the password is blah, blah, blah. If they give you a password, even if it's 1234 or just 123 or 500, whatever it is, they typically do that because that then stops the email security system from being able to look in the archive, because that email system doesn't know that the password is 1234. It's a simple password, but it doesn't know that. So when you then double click and go, oh, this is secure, I'll put the password in 1234. The zip file opens up like a folder. You see something in there, says invoice, for something, or free gift card, whatever it is, and you go boop, boop, double click, game over from there. Your entire organization can fall victim to ransomware. It's just as simple as that, by the way. Okay. The other thing is links that may go to attachments, right? Let's talk about the other kind of links you'll see in phishing that go to what look to be login pages. So it'll say, click here to get whatever the phishing lure is, your Amazon gift card, your Alibaba gift card, whatever it is. And you say, okay, boop, boop. And then it takes you to a login page. Pretty much any type of login page. Be very, very weary of it if you click it from a link in an email that isn't something you're extremely familiar with, right? And those login pages can look really, really good, right? Really good. They can make it look exactly like the service that purportedly the email is from, exactly like it, okay? The number one thing to be wary of is when it says log in with your email and password in order to get this resource. In other words, it's asking you to log in to whatever that page is using your corporate email address and its password. No, do not do that. Stop it. Stop it now. And then report that. Make sure that you report it because it can be very, very helpful to your organization. I can't stress how much reporting emails, if you have a place to report them, right, can really be to stop ransomware. It's such a huge thing. So I have to log in. I go, okay, well, here's my email address, and here's my password. I just given my credentials out. It's called credential harvesting. They're trying to harvest credentials from you, and they just have successfully done so. They now have your username and your password. So once they have that, what are they going to do with it, right? They could log into the email system as you, and then maybe even do fraudulent things in there or look at your email and then try to, do weird stuff in there. That's referred to as business email compromise. Or ransomware actors, if they're involved in this type of thing, what they will do is they will then try to find, does your company have remote desktop protocol open to the internet? And you probably do somewhere. And you're probably sitting there thinking, no, we don't. If you're in IT, you're like, no. We don't have RDP exposed to the internet. Like, we don't have that. That's what every one of my clients says that got hit with, a remote logon via RDP as the infection vector. They all say, no, we didn't have that exposed. Well, yeah, you did. I wouldn't be here if you didn't have that. I'm a consultant, by the way. I work the cases. So do you have a company VPN, right? Virtual private network. Can you VPN into your organization's network? Meaning from your home location or hotel or whatever, right? Can you go boop, boop on a little program on your computer, usually called a VPN or sometimes called a gateway or something, and put your credentials in and then get basically routed through your company's network? Can the threat actor do that now that they have your username and password, right? If your organization has multi-factor authentication, what we call MFA, then hopefully they will not be able to, because they'll put the username and password in, and then it will say, hey, we just sent you a text message, right? What's the code? And then you would get that. You would personally get that message, all right? More on that coming up in about a minute. Ooh, be careful of those. If you didn't request them, by the way, that's what happened to Uber. Oops. So if you have MFA, okay, great. What if your company just doesn't happen to have that? Or what if the company happens to have RDP open to the internet on some server, and for whatever reason, your credentials are allowed to log in, right? Some of you in the IT crowd's going, well, why would they be in the remote desktop users group? I don't know. Why do so many companies keep putting everyone in there? I don't know why it happens. It just does. So your credentials being exposed, sure, they can let people into your email, right? Your email credentials, your email password. But on the other hand, they can let those individuals into your network, right? Maybe you have VMware Horizon. Maybe you have all the other, Citrix. Maybe you have a Citrix installation. That's also seen often as an infection vector. So maybe they are able to get into your environment and actually then be technically on the inside of your network. Remember, this is your network. Now they're actually in the network, and they can do bad stuff now using your credentials. Why? Like, how are they going to use your account? Because you gave them your password. All you did was give them your password, right? So you have to be very, very careful of phishing. And the relation to RDP is, in one sense, giving out your password. Don't give out your password. That seems obvious, right? Don't do that. If you are trying to log into a site, it's asking for your corporate email and password. Yeah, I don't know about all that. Check that. Make darn sure the site that you're accessing, report it, find out, is this our site, right? The other thing is, you may have a login page that you're brought to in these credential harvesting attacks, right? There's a link in the email. You go, boop, boop, you click it. Actually, email links are usually just a boop, a single click. And it brings up a window, and it'll say, like, You can use your Gmail, you can use your LinkedIn, and then it lists like every freaking service under the sun, right? You can use any of these to log in, and you go, oh, okay. And then you click the one you like and put those credentials in. Well, now you just gave those to the threat actor. Like, don't do that. Okay, so that's the phishing stuff. I want to talk a little bit about passwords and for device security also, right? Kind of passwords and devices for the last 5 or so minutes that we have here. And I actually have a question that I don't think I saw here, so I apologize. Based on that, we could put rules. Oh, actually, that was just someone who works in IT who had a great idea. So I like that idea. Email gateway to find the type of email. Yeah, report those emails. Please report those because folks like that right there in the chat can maybe save your entire company because of you. Okay, your password. You most likely have a password policy within your organization. And that password policy dictates the type of password that you can or have to use. I go like this. I see myself in the camera going, do you have to use? Because I get really like, ugh. Do not try to subvert the security protections afforded by that particular policy, whatever yours happens to be. You know, say it has to be at least 12 characters, has to have at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, something like that, right? You have to have secure passwords that are not, for example, words directly from the dictionary, that are not words or things or phrases or passcodes or whatever that would be easily attributable to you. If you're driving around in a 2022 Tesla and your password has like Tesla, just those little kinds of things, because people can target you in that regard. But if you have a password that maybe even matches your password policy, but is just so trivial, threat actors can what we call brute force it. Brute forcing is essentially just trying a bunch of passwords until one of them works. Yeah, I got your password. Another thing that threat actors will do is they will spray credentials. It's an odd term. Spraying credentials means I take one password and I try it against every account in your organization. I try the one password, right? So your security detection mechanisms that would be looking for like, hey, someone just tried to log into Ryan's account 20,000 times over 2 days. Like, what is that about, right? That's a brute force. That's obvious. What may not be as obvious is taking one password and then say every 5 to 10 minutes, trying it against a different account, or even for that matter, 15 to 30 seconds, whatever, right? A lot of security systems may not get that. Starting in 2016, there was a group based out of Iran. They went by the name, they were ascribed the name APT-33. They were an Advanced Persistent Threat Nation State Sponsored Attack Group. All right, they're still active now. They found, I'm going to go in the chat here, so check out the chat here. They found, actually, my chat's not updating. Hold on. Let me refresh my LinkedIn page here, and then I'll put it in the chat. They found that the passwords that were, for example, the month, like right now it's October of 2022, and I'll put an exclamation point at the end there. If your password looks like what I just put in the chat right now, stop it. Go change your password. All right. Thank you for popping that on the screen. The month, the year, and then a special character or a couple, or a special character and then the month, the year, or the year and then the month, or the season. If it's fall, or what are we in now? Are we in fall? Is this summer or fall? I don't know. Whatever we're in. I don't know where I am. So, if you 2022 fall, what Raiders, I don't know, your sports team or whatever, right? Those types of passwords, even though it matches your password policy, those are horrible. These particular passwords here, the Iranian group found that a bunch of people, and I mean like a lot of people, were using those types of passwords. So in that case, we are in fall. Okay, thank you, Gregory. In that case, they were actually attacking the United States energy sector, and they were being quite successful in getting in because they were using those types of passwords to spray against the environment. And they found a number of people working in the energy sector who happen to have that kind of password. Oops. So your password, you may have guidance, hopefully you do, at your organization. Your guidance may say to make it extremely complicated and have all kinds of, crazies and all that. Okay. Another alternative idea is to have essentially a passphrase. There's an old comic from, I don't know what year, 2010 or something. And it's basically a comic in which it talks about the entropy of your password. In other words, how difficult it would be to crack your password. right? And if you have 8 to 10 characters that are all, random special characters and all that, whatever, how long would it actually take to crack that? Versus if you just had the password, and I don't remember exactly, but it was like correct horse staple battery, like a bunch of words all strung together. And for that matter, with some capitals in there or whatnot, right? Pass phrases, those are increasing what we call the key space, and basically making that, even though there are some words strung together, if you add in a bunch of other modifiers to that big old long phrase, it makes it very difficult for that to actually be cracked, or for that matter to be guessed. So just be cognizant that your password is not something that, now when I give you that example, that you're not going, oh, actually mine is a bit derivative of, something like that. So be careful for that. And the other thing that I want to go into, and I just have a couple minutes here, involves device security. So for devices, you have a lot of security awareness training around your mobile devices, and you have it around keeping your workstation or your laptop like locked, when you're away from the device and whatnot. Here's one particular thing that I would like everyone to please pay attention to, and that is stop it saving your passwords in your browser. If you use Microsoft Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, Chrome, I don't care what you use. If you use any browser, by the way, Opera, all of them, they are trivial to retrieve those passwords when you store them in your browser. So I'm hoping that you have some type of password management utility that's provided, like through your work, approved by IT, that kind of thing. Those can also be attacked, don't get me wrong, but much more difficult than simply pulling passwords out of a browser. If a threat actor gets into your environment, they're going to be running a number of tools that try to grab passwords out of your browser. And if you have a bunch of passwords in there, credentials, then they're going to get access to them. And it's very, very common that we see threat actors do that and then gain additional access into organizations, or even then gain access to your financial institutions and whatnot. So, all right, I'll get close to wrapping up here, like right now, because I've been yapping for almost an hour. But hopefully that helped out, give you a nice 20-minute overview of like what's ransomware really about, right? How does ransomware get into the environment? Yet phishing, be very careful of those direct attachments or links, the links that go to, hey, download this file. Hey, don't. And the links that go to, hey, put your credentials in, like log in, to get this hotel reservation that you didn't know about or whatever. Like, don't do that, that kind of thing. And then remote desktop protocol, as far as most users are concerned, your password, if it's insecure, if you have that kind of password I put in the chat, they might get into RDP or your VPN via that, right? And then just don't give your password out. Just whatever you think, well, people, why would I give away my password? Because people do all the time. So again, my name is Ryan Chapman. I'm the author of Forensics 528, Ransomware for Incident Responders. I hope I was able to show you some new fun stuff today, and I appreciate everyone for hanging out with me and being here. And I think that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and sign off.